So here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you happen to be in the world today. Welcome one and all to Coffee Talk. It is time once again for Coffee Talk Live, where we will be having some discussion about what is going on in the world today. We'll take a look at some clips from the news, share a little bit of dialogue with those of you who are able to join us for the live portion. And if you're listening somewhere else and you wanted to join the live portion, you can find us Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube, on Coffee Talk and Prepper University. You can find us on X at Coffee Talk Chat, fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta, and Coffee Talk 2 on Rumble. Isn't that right, Granny Smith? Granny Smith, everybody, for those of you who can see, keeping me company today. Naturally, I do read through as many of the comments as is reasonable. And I'll go ahead and I'll say hello to some of the people that are chiming in on the live portion. See, Jeff is with us today, as well as Helter, Dragon, D-Lo, Brian, Luke Man, Lucky. D-Lo says thumbs up. Yeah, if you don't mind, ladies and gentlemen, I'll take all the thumbs up I can get. Brian says he actually got a notification. I'm shocked. I'm absolutely shocked. Jimmy is here as we get ready to jump off. I don't know if Puck is in here yet. Puck usually shows up. And hello to everyone else who is listening and not able to chime in. And I know that a lot of people, more people, watch after the fact than during the live portion. 2 p.m. Eastern Standard doesn't fit everybody's time frame, but it's what I can do for the time being as we get ready to jump off here. And I wanted to start with something a little odd. And this happened, I believe, yesterday in Texas. And before we get anywhere near the thumbnail, just a few things to catch up on. And Monkey has joined us, as well as JJ, who did not get a notification. Common problem. And there's Puck. Something you said yesterday when I was signing off that I did not have a chance to address, and this is addressing Puck specifically. I know that's not how it's pronounced, but I got to be careful with my language options. Was mentioning how morbid obesity is a disability, and that's correct. And I don't know if people realize just how bad that aspect of morbid obesity is from a Western perspective. My wife likes to watch My 600-Pound Life. She also watches Hoarders, okay? And, I look at different aspects of these shows than the average person does. And one of the observations that I've made, first of all, when they say 600-pound life, I imagine they must mean 600 pounds average over the weight limit of your BMI, because those people are a hell of a lot heavier than 600 pounds in most cases. She was watching one the other day, and the guy was like, I think it was 928 pounds. Like, God, that's almost 1,000 pounds. How the hell do you sustain that? How do you live? But one of the observations that a couple of observations, one is obvious and one isn't. The obvious one is, when I was growing up, you didn't see that. Someone being that size, unheard of. But now it's getting pretty common. There's thousands upon thousands of morbidly obese people in the West and in the United States. But the not so obvious, and it's something that I caught on to, if you're watching, these people do not work. They don't have jobs. They're collecting welfare. They're collecting disability. They're collecting SSI. So your tax dollars are paying for them to be morbidly obese and basically kill themselves and be a detriment to their families. Because if you're that heavy, your lifespan is cut by 2/3 easily. Most people that are morbidly obese, they die in their 20s to mid 30s if something isn't done. So you're paying for them to you're paying for them to exist. You're paying for them to indulge in their habit. Your tax dollars. You're paying for their medical. When they're traveling to Texas to meet with Dr. Now on the show, who do you think's paying for that? When they have to get a motel room in that city and hang around for months waiting for him to approve them because they're not losing weight. You know how Dr. Now is with that. And I see Jane has joined us. When he gets on them, you're supposed to lose 60 pounds in 2 months and you've gained 18 pounds. So what is the problem? What do we not understand here? Because he's heard so much of that shit, he doesn't believe anything they tell him. Oh, this water weight on this is not water weight. I know what is water weight. This is not water weight. This is fat. And your tax dollars are paying for that surgery if they're approved. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. I've seen one episode where the guy had a job and they showcased it. He did customer service from home. So he's propped up in his bed, sitting up with a tray with a laptop on it and a headset, and talking to people, helping them with whatever customer service he works with. Rodney says in 1980, the vested interest inverted the food pyramid in order to sell vast amounts of grain. Look at the pictures and films before 1980. How many fatties do you see? Well, more so than just the grain, because honestly, I mean, I eat a lot of grain. And, I'm not overweight or obese or anything like that. But what also was introduced, and I've talked about this before because I did a paper on it in college, actually, is that's around the time, very late 70s, early 80s, when they introduced corn syrup into the regular food sources. And now it's in everything you eat. And that corn syrup is a problem for the body. But yeah, since Puck had said that yesterday, and I wanted to just touch on that. And Anarchy is here from Minnesota. And Puck wants to know if morbidly obese people on disability get a higher limit on EBT cards. I have no idea. I don't know, but man, they eat a lot. I mean, you watch these people. In order to maintain that weight, and this is what Dr. Now talks about a lot on the show, in order to maintain that weight, you're consuming 7,000 to 10,000 calories a day or more. In some of those instances, those people's diets were in the 12 to 15,000 calorie range. Do you know how much food you would have to consume? Even if you were eating healthy food, do you know how much food you would have to consume on a daily basis? It's insane. It's like a week's worth of food. You sit there and you watch these people on these shows, and they're putting down, I mean, a bodybuilder might put down 5,000 calories a day, but he's using it. He's absorbing that. With his exercise, these people aren't moving. They aren't moving. How do you do that? And then they can't even go to the bathroom. They crap in the beds. Somebody comes in, puts a sheet under them and cleans them up because they can't move. But these people, their organs either fail or they die from an infection because they have open sores they don't know about. It's a terrible existence, and the system helps them by paying for this food. Raccoon has joined us. And Rodney made a donation to the channel. Thank you, Rodney. He says that impression. Yeah, Dr. Now. The only way you sustain this, you have to be eating about 12,000 calories a day. We need to get you down 800 calories. 800 calories a day to put off the weight. You're killing yourself. You don't look human. He's brutal, but he has to be. But thank you again, Rodney. And Tuck is here. Yeah, Rodney, it's the corn syrup and especially high fructose corn syrup. That's what changed in the diet specifically, because people were, I mean, they were already primarily on a grain diet anyways. I mean, most people back in the day, they couldn't afford meat. They ate mostly bread products. And David is here. Puck is hoping that RFK will ban high fructose. He's trying. He's trying. Yeah, JJ, there you go. Because it just runs right through them. It runs right through them. They if you can imagine them going to the bathroom constantly, it's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. But I mean, 10, 12, 15,000 calories in a day. And Flukeman's talking about Trump saying Xi is his friend. I think he means in a casual sense. In a casual sense, and plus he's trying to be friendly because of the analogical thought process of people in China. Tuck says EBT allocation based on income, assets, and dependents, at least in my state, but also keeping in mind that not on top of just welfare resources, they're getting disability, getting SSI, they're getting a lot of funding in, and it's all going right down their throat. It's pretty disgusting. Now, and then, yeah, that's Jimmy's point. He says he ate 5,500 calories a day when he was lifting weights, and it's all I could do to get to that. And that is the common. My wife and I also watch a lot of the strongman competitions. The thing they hate the most is eating. They hate it. They don't want to eat that much. It's uncomfortable for them. They don't want to. But getting in, here's a little conspiracy theory moment before we move into the news. And I have an update also before we get to the nature of the thumbnail. This is a Fox 4 KDFW, which is a local Texas station. You may have seen this in the news yesterday. And Marvel Fan has joined us. $800,000 in dimes spills into the North Texas highway. Okay. So US 287 was shut down all day in Alvarado because of a crash involving an 18-wheeler hauling dimes, $800,000 worth of dimes scattered on the roadway. Crews worked for 14 hours to pick up all the loose change. So here we are. So the hold still. The Alvord Fire Department confirmed dimes spilled from an 18-wheel that overturned on Highway 287 near Alvord High School around 5:30 a.m. Texas Department of Public Safety said the driver veered off the roadway, overcorrected, and it rolled on its side. 800,000 dimes, that $800,000 worth of dimes, which would be about 8 million dimes, were scattered across the roadway. Highway had been shut down all the way until 7 p.m. so crews could recover the loose change. Driver and a passenger had to go to the hospital with minor injuries. Okay. They do not know who the 18-wheeler was hauling for, where it was going, or what they were doing. This is the interesting part, okay? So you've got a trailer that was hauling 8 million dimes in containers, all right? Not sacked, not rolled. 8 million, almost $1 million worth of dimes, all right? They're not from the Treasury. They haven't disclosed who these people were or what they were doing. They don't know. And, you know, tinfoil hat time, okay? It makes me think of, because since COVID, during the whole pandemic, there's been change shortages, coin shortages, even though the mint claims they're overproducing. Where's all the change going? Oh, because you remember that even stores like Walgreens didn't have change. in various states, shortages of coins, which I believe was orchestrated to try to make people more comfortable with digital currency, with the whole concept of digital currency. And I'm like, if they can't be, either they're lying about overproducing the coins, or they're shifting these coins around and stashing them somewhere. Suddenly, I know this is after the whole COVID scam, but suddenly you've got a tractor trailer loaded with loose dimes, has an accident. Oh, we don't know who that trucking company is. We don't know where they were going. Yeah, okay. Okay. And Marvel says he'll bet people will be out there looking after the fact. Yeah, maybe. I'm sure they found, well, I don't know if all the dimes were recovered. There's no way to know at the moment. No way to know at the moment. I just think that's really suspiciously interesting. While they still claim to be having shortages of coins, who the hell are these people? What's that all about? What's that all about? People don't drop a dime anymore, Lucky. He says, talk about dropping a dime. Yeah, because there's hardly any payphones left in the country. Incredible. But I thought that was very interesting. And I'm going to do a follow-up story on something we talked about the other day. You might recall I showed you a photograph of the U.S. senator that is trying to bring articles of impeachment against Donald Trump. You remember Michigan State Representative Sri Thanedar? Sri Thanedar, the guy with the bad toupee? And one more here before I get into that. Flukeman says one day the population will get so high the 1,000-pound people be the first to get Logan's Run. Then the old disabled people come after. Yeah, they in a situation like that, yeah, they serve no purpose. In a society where you have to function, that wouldn't go well for them. But you remember Sri Thanedar, the guy with the really bad haircut and the Botox? We talked about him the other day. Yeah, Puck says the 7-Eleven guy. The guy who hates Donald Trump so much. I have to follow him up because something came out this morning on him. Breaking news, okay? Breaking news. There he is with his, I can't even say William Shatner wig because Shatner always had really, really good hair pieces. That's a really shitty hair piece. That looks awful, okay? There's Sri Thanedar, Democratic congressman from Michigan, okay? Listen to how dirty this guy is. Get ready for it. Get ready for it, all right? Democratic congressman, and this is a New York Post article, Democratic congressman calling for Trump's impeachment was accused of indescribable acts involving 118 beagles in his pharmaceutical lab. Democratic congressman trying to impeach President Trump was accused of abandoning 118 beagles inside of his pharmaceutical testing lab when it went bankrupt. Representative Sri Thanedar, who announced Monday he had filed 7 articles of impeachment against Trump, was forced to shutter the New Jersey lab Annie Clin Preclinical Services when the parent company that he owned filed for bankruptcy in April 2010. Now, this is a story that had been buried, which is why it's circulating in the news today. It actually started appearing in newspapers this morning at around 7 in the morning. Like this one right here was published 7:16 a.m. Eastern Standard Time by the New York Post. This is a story that was buried that's circulating again. Okay, this was his laboratory. I also heard that there were monkeys there as well. Several months later, animal activists became aware the hounds were stuck inside an abandoned facility. Lab workers allegedly been jumping the facility's fences to give the beagles food and water. The scores of dogs were eventually rescued from the lab by animal welfare groups later that July and rehomed. At the time, Thanedar said the Bank of America was in control of the lab after seizing it during the bankruptcy proceedings. So basically, his animal experimental facility, where he experimented on dogs and I heard also monkeys, basically torturing animals to make sure your shampoo is safe, which I don't agree with that practice anyways. I hate that. I have huge problems with it. You all know I have my little cat shelter that I take care of. So this is the guy who, when he went bankrupt, chained the doors up and left those animals to die. And the employees from that facility, a couple of them had been jumping over the fence to try to care for them and got caught, which opened a Humane Society investigation where they broke in under warrant, I would assume, and confiscated the animals that were still alive. So not only are you experimenting on animals, but you abandon them when they're no longer financially viable and just leave them to suffer and die in the worst way possible. Tuck says the blend of vanity and insanity that drives a man to wear an ill-suited toupee. Yeah. And Rodney says Thanedar is a stereotype, hypocritical, greasy politician. His entire look and manner is off-putting, the sort of person you wouldn't let near children. Yeah. Indeed. But that's disheartening. That breaks my heart. I hate seeing stuff like that. I hate seeing stuff like that. This is the kind of guy we're dealing with. Someone who would take advantage of and then abandon the most helpless. John says the bank took it over. That's what he said. The bank may have took it over, but there were animals trapped inside, and he turned a blind eye to it. He didn't even tell anybody, which is why the workers were still breaking into the facility to feed and water them. All he did was turn around and blame the bank. Oh, it's not my fault. It's the bank's fault. You were warned in advance. You could have done something to get those animals out of there. You knew they were coming. But no, you locked the doors and you walked away. Not my problem. The bank said they're going to come and take it. Sven says this is far beyond the grossness of testing. Flukeman says, why would anyone leave them to die? I don't get all the animals. I don't get all the animals out of his hair if he had given them away. He could have done something, even surrendering the animals. And that's what organizations like the Humane Society are for. That's what they're for. But here's the nature of the thumbnail here. As we get to this story, and who has this article? This is a CNBC article, actually. And here's League of Smoke joining us today. CNBC article coming up to explain the thumbnail. Talking about Donald Trump and the Ukraine. Because the deal that Trump tried to make from the moment he took office has been approved now with the Ukraine. So that was the nature, apparently, of the meeting that took place at the Vatican. CNBC, U.S. and Ukraine sign a landmark minerals deal after months of fraught negotiation. And there it is. The U.S. and Ukraine have signed a long-awaited minerals deal providing Washington with preferential access to Kiev's natural resources in exchange for the formation of a reconstruction investment fund. The highly anticipated agreement, long coveted by U.S. President Trump, comes after months of tense negotiation and more than 3 years since the start of Russia's invasion of the Ukraine. U.S. Secretary of Treasury Scott Bassent said on Wednesday the economic partnership would allow the two countries to invest together to accelerate Ukraine's economic recovery and help to facilitate the end of the cruel and senseless war. This agreement signals clearly to Russia that the Trump administration is committed to a peace process centered on a free, sovereign, and prosperous Ukraine over the long term, according to Bassent. Since his inauguration in January, Trump has pushed for a minerals deal with Ukraine, saying an agreement to jointly develop and monetize Kiev's deposits of rare earth critical minerals, oil, gas, and other natural resources would act effectively as compensation for U.S. aid to Ukraine throughout their war with Russia. Again, this is something that he wanted to do from day one, to recover some of the hundreds of billions of dollars that Biden dumped into the Ukrainian war effort in an attempt to fight a proxy war with Russia. And Trump was like, no, we need that paid back. We need to make sure NATO doesn't get involved, because NATO hasn't really served a purpose since the Berlin Wall fell. And this also should put Russia in a position to start backing off. So hopefully that all works out, but we've got the mineral deal now, which means that we will now eventually, not immediately, but eventually get back the money that was invested in the Ukraine. And if you recall, Volodymyr Zelensky sat there and said there was no way we were ever going to get a minerals deal, and that he was never going to pay anything back to the U.S. And now here we are. So it happened. It just took longer than Trump would have liked, but it did eventually happen. Monkey said, since the U.S. is going to be in the Ukraine for the minerals, is this like going to be where Russia is going to begin backing off? I'm sure they'll be more willing to negotiate now. And that's the point. And Ukraine's already taken the first step then by making this deal. And really, it was a pissing contest between Putin and Zelensky to see who was going to start to cave first. It's a bravado thing. It's saving face. Well, now Ukraine blinked, so Russia can relax, if that makes any sense. You have to think about the thought process of the people in that part of the world. Sven says, and now we have a joint international vested interest. That is how it's supposed to be done. And Puck thinks it'll encourage Russians to continue. I'm not sure. I don't think so, but we'll see. And Monkey says, unless Russia wants to say F it and make things worse than the India-Pakistan issue. I don't know. And Peter doesn't think Ukraine will keep the deal. Well, hopefully they will. Hopefully they will. So in comments to a town hall on the News Nation network, Trump said the deal represents payback for the money the U.S. has spent so far on supporting Ukraine's war effort. Trump added that he wanted to be protected. I didn't want to be out there and look foolish. The U.S. president also confirmed that he held talks with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky about the minerals deal when they both attended Pope Francis's funeral last week. And there it is. That's what it was all about. And this time, there was some photos that were taken. But nobody was interfering. Peter says Ukraine has violated every deal since 2014. Well, like I said, we'll see. We'll see what happens. It's a good step if they stick to it. Mainly all I'm concerned about is that the United States gets that tax money back. And John made a donation to the channel. Thank you, John. always appreciated, goes a long way towards helping us with our cat shelter. He wants the Ukraine to get all of its land back. I understand. I get it. I get it. They may or may not, keeping in mind that the that one corner of the Ukraine wanted to break away. But, we'll see what happens. Again, I don't want to make predictions. It's a good idea. And ultimately, from my perspective, the important thing is that the United States recover all of that money that's been invested. Actually, it's more than hundreds of billions. It's like what, 1.4, 1.6 trillion, something crazy. We can't afford it. We need that money back. Biden spent almost just short of $11 trillion during his tenure. In roughly 4 years, he spent $11 trillion, and some of it's not even accountable. As you recall, when they got into the U.S. Treasury, they were having trouble with the accounting because something like $1.2 trillion of it doesn't even have a numeric value, i.e., there was no record keeping, so they don't know where the hell it went or who received it or what it was spent on. Just that it was spent, it was distributed to somebody, which is unacceptable. Rodney says the EU have not a leg to stand on with their crying about Trump's attempts to make a deal. They threw Ukraine to the wolves in 2014 with smug looks on their faces. How many? Yeah. But again, this would be good for the U.S. if for no other reason than to recover some of the money. And this is the real reason, besides putting an end to the war, this is the real reason why Trump wanted to do this. And Tuck wants to know, he says his wife wants to know how many cats we have currently. We're currently taking care of 15. We're currently taking care of 15 at the moment. And Sven says he thinks it was Tucker Carlson had a guest on saying that we're missing 21 trillion cents in the 80s. 21 trillion cents in the 80s. I'm not sure what you mean. But that's the whole point. I mean, Zelensky seems to have caved here. Hopefully they keep the deal. Hopefully they follow through with it. It's good to have another option for rare earth minerals, and it's good to be in a position to recover at least some of the money that had been invested in that proxy war, basically, that Biden was carrying on through the Ukraine against Russia. As I've pointed out before, a proxy war worked against the Soviet Union, the USSR, in the 80s when they were invading Afghanistan for 10 years, because the Soviet Union was practically bankrupt. They were overextended. They were stretched too thin. So a proxy war worked then. It's not going to work now because Russia has practically no debt. They're roughly $500 billion in debt, 500 billion and change in debt. So yeah, a proxy war against them wouldn't make any sense. Now, here's another story. It's pretty interesting. This is a USA Today article. USA Today article. Guns drawn. The FBI barged into the wrong house. Supreme Court justice calls it ridiculous. This is an interesting story. Okay. You may have seen it in the headlines. because there's been a Supreme Court ruling on the subject of this basically a law enforcement home invasion. Supreme Court sounded willing to allow an Atlanta family to sue the FBI for compensation over the mistaken search of their home, but reluctant to define how much protection law enforcement officers deserve in carrying out their jobs. Trina Martin, her son Gabe, and her partner Toy Clayat awoke on the morning of October 2017 to what she called the monstrous noise of a half a dozen FBI agents barging into their homes with guns drawn. But the FBI agents were at the wrong home, 436 feet from a similar beige split-level house where a suspected gang member lived. The justices sounded willing to allow a lawsuit for compensation for the mistake after lower courts dismissed the case. Quote, "You are begging the question, which is how far does the discretionary exception go?" Justice Sonia Sotomayor told the government lawyer. The FBI agents described the meticulous planning to search the house by locating it with GPS during daylight, taking pictures, and drawing up a tactical plan. Frederick Liu, an assistant to the Solicitor General, said officers were weighing public safety concerns and executing the search swiftly through steps such as not checking the address on the mailbox as the house before entering. So Justice Neil Gorsuch asked whether U.S. policy says don't break down the wrong door of a house or don't traumatize its occupants. How about make sure you're on the right street? Of course, it's the United States policy to execute the warrants at the right house. Liu replies, what I would say is exactly what the courts below found, which is that the officers had made a reasonable mistake as to where they were. So basically, what's interesting about this, all right? What's interesting about this is that this family has the resources to even take this to court, because this sort of thing happens almost every day. John says he's from the UK. It's sad to see Americans helping Russia. What happened to you guys? Well, remember that Russia helped the UK during World War II, and Churchill sucked up quite a bit to do it. But also, it's not so much a matter of helping Russia, is putting the US in a position to not be funding anything in that part of the world anymore. It's not helping Russia to broker a deal with Ukraine and try to get some of our money back. To try to get the money back. So FBI charge barged into the wrong house. This happens all the time. Most of the time, there's nothing that you can do. There's nothing you can do about it. Nothing you can do about it. But these people were able to get it as far as the Supreme Court for discovery. They're still not getting any compensation. But this happens all the time. And they're not held liable. And I've told the story before. When I was still living in Kansas, I knew a woman there who her home was broken into by KBI. That's the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. They were looking for her ex-boyfriend, who she told them, you know, I haven't seen that guy in damn near a year. I don't know where the hell he is. And they ransacked her house. They removed her plumbing. They pulled up floorboards in her kitchen because he was supposed to have been wounded, so they were looking for blood. Okay? They took all that stuff back to the lab. Didn't find anything, but they did find the guy like a week later somewhere else who confirmed, oh, her? I haven't seen her in like a year. He had never been there. Then they returned her floorboards and her plumbing, but they didn't fix anything, and they're not liable. They're protected by the warrant. They're also protected by the warrant if they go to the wrong house. And that's just not right. That's just not right. Unfortunately. And that's why it struck me. Most people, they can't afford to keep pursuing this legally, especially getting up before a Supreme Court. These people, fortunately, were able to continue to pursue it. They were able to pursue it. I'll continue cascading some of those comments because there's too much going on for me to keep up. Speaking of somebody who can't keep it up, we may as well talk about Tim Walz. Again, he's in the news every day. I thought this was an interesting story. Because they really are seriously trying to run him for 2028. It's ridiculous. Fox News article coming up here. Walz says that Harris, this is not helping. And every time he opens his mouth, his chances, I think, get slimmer. Walz says Harris picked him for vice president so he could code talk to white guys. I got news for you, Tim. White guys don't identify with you either. Okay? Nobody identifies with Tim Walz except for the Chinese government. I think they're the only ones that identify with Tim Walz. Former Vice President nominee Governor Tim Walz, Democrat from Minnesota, continued a self-described listening tour because he's still on tour, by the way. He's still doing those town halls across the country. He's still doing those town halls across the country. All right. And I wonder again, when are you going back to Minnesota? Aren't you still governor there? Don't you have things to do? Don't you have things to do? Former vice president continued his listening tour across the country. He's at Harvard Kennedy School Forum, Harvard Kennedy Forum School Monday night. Revealing why former Vice President Kamala Harris chose him as her running mate. Walz said Harris chose him in part because, quote, I could code talk to white guys watching football or fixing their truck and put them at ease. The Minnesota governor described himself as the permission structure for white men from rural America to get them to vote Democrat. Tim, does he seem to you like the guy to have the football party and help you fix your truck? Walz thinks he's Hank Hill. You got to be kidding me. Quote, I think I'll give you pretty good stuff, but I'll also give you 10% problematic, Walz added when pushed by moderator Brittany Shepard from ABC News National about why he didn't take the message to cable news to reach a larger audience. Walz laughed off criticism over inconsistencies in his background on the 2024 campaign trail, describing himself as a knucklehead. Yeah, we know that. Walz told Jake Tapper from CNN earlier this month he was considering a third bid for Minnesota governor, but was not thinking about running for president in 2028. That's not true. He has said he was, or he's been propped up for it. When asked by Shepard to explain, Walz said the Democratic Party should run a collective 2028 presidential campaign. Quote, I think we need to collectively run a presidential campaign without a candidate right now that builds all the infrastructure. By the time we get to 2028, we're ready, Walz said. Then why are you doing town hall meetings everywhere but Minnesota, where you are the governor? Why haven't you been back? Why haven't you been back since? I don't think he's returned, has he? Because every time I see him and he's in the news daily, I just don't bother usually, unless he says something really stupid. He's in the news pretty much every day. And every day he's in a different city across the country. He's in California, he's in Texas, he's everywhere. But when is he governing his state? When is he doing the job? Again, the quote, I could talk to white guys watching football or fixing their truck and put them at ease. It didn't work, Tim. It didn't work. Elmer Fudd there. I hesitate to call him that. I know a FUD is a derogatory term used by gun enthusiasts for someone who doesn't know what the hell they're doing. But Elmer Fudd at least knew how to load a shotgun. He looked like a fool when he did stuff like that because he really is not very familiar. He's not the backwoods guy. Putting him in a camouflage hat and a flannel shirt does not make him butch. And you recall the article that we read, even when he was running for president, that described him as being a man's man. I'm a lumberjack and I'm okay. JJ says, do recall our founding fathers warned about staying far away from the affairs of Europe. Not listening got us dragged into 2 world wars and several smaller wars. You can thank Theodore Roosevelt for that. Theodore Roosevelt's the one that wanted to turn the United States into the world's police force instead of minding our own business. That was his angle. He's the one that got us into the Spanish-American War. And he's the one that negotiated with Panamanian rebels so he could take over the Panama Canal project after France abandoned it. Now, Theodore Roosevelt opened the door for that. I know this is way behind on the comments, but there he is, and that picture pretty much sums it up. Actually, is that an actual photograph or did somebody Photoshop that? It looks photoshopped. His head is gigantic. He looks like that clown that you squirt the water in his mouth at the carnival. Incredible. Nash reminds us most homeowners insurance doesn't cover acts of government. That's right. Yeah, if the police break into your house, the insurance is not going to assist you. That is a good point. That is a good point. Incredible. But I mean, they wanted to run Newsom, Governor Nuisance from California. There he is. They had wanted to run him, but after the whole wildfire fiasco, he looks so bad they can't do it. They wanted to run Harris, but now they're not going to. They want to run Harris for governor of California, I guess, so they can finish destroying it. And then you have Tim Walz here, little China boy, quite literally. Remember, his first job was in China. He's been back and forth to China more than 30 times. He had his honeymoon in China. I'll keep putting up some of these comments here so people can see. It just cracks me up. He actually thinks he's like Chuck Norris here. He thinks he's the brawny paper towel guy. I could code talk to white guys watching football or fixing their truck and put them at ease. No, you can't. I promise you, you can't. I promise you, I do not look at this guy and think he knows what the hell he's doing at all. Especially after that video of him trying to load that shotgun. That was just embarrassing. That was absolutely embarrassing. And then trying to blame the gun. It's like, dude, you're holding it upside down. Of course you can't get any slugs into the breech. Nothing about him makes me think masculinity. Like I said, he thinks he's king of the hill. He thinks he's Hank Hill. Got a little corruption story for you here coming up. Corruption story coming up. If it'll open, StreamYard is dragging its heels a little bit. Raccoon says he's smoking the good stuff. Well, no, he drinks the good stuff, remember? He's got a little drinking habit. If you remember that. What he's been accused of beverages that he's been accused of indulging in. There's no proof of that, though. It's just rumors. It's just rumors. Puck says that's the first he's heard of code talk. Well, you know what code talking is. That's what usually, because that when you see, and I'll explain in case anybody doesn't understand real briefly here, when you see Kamala Harris or AOC or Hillary Clinton, usually it's a female politician that does this, and they change their accent, and then they got called out in the media because it's embarrassing. Why are you talking with a Southern accent just because you're in Mississippi, so on and so forth? They refer to that as code talking, and they think it's clever. They think it's clever. But here you go, country local news. Outrage. They should be. This is crazy. As Minnesota Food Bank CEO pockets $721,000 annually, while her executives earn $300,000 annually, advocating for hunger relief. Okay. Now, I looked at, I don't know if it tells you how many. I think it's 5 executives that work under her, earning from 300, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, 312 to 382,000 a year. And she gets 721,000 a year for running a food bank. In a shocking revelation, the CEO of a Minnesota-based food bank NGO has been found to be earning an astonishing $721,000 annually. This news has raised eyebrows and sparked conversations about the compensation structures within nonprofit organizations, especially those that advocate for food security and rely heavily on taxpayer funding, because it is a nonprofit food bank and it is taxpayer funded. The issue has drawn significant attention, particularly as this nonprofit has been vocal about the pressing problem of hunger in their state, advocating for even more resources to combat food insecurity. And I hate that term. I hate the term food insecurity. It's just something else, another buzzword for the media to throw out to try to get us to be afraid of everything, and it's bullshit. Food insecurity. I'm scared. My 600-pound life is scared too. The reported salary of the food bank CEO is part of a broader trend in which nonprofit executives are compensated at rates comparable to those as for-profit sector. Along with the CEO's substantial salary, it has come to light that other executives within the organization also earn more than $300,000 per year. Like I said, I believe I read this in another article before I found this one. It's 5. I want to say 5. And their salary is ranging from just over 300,000 to damn near 4. I think the highest was 382,000. This raises critical questions about the allocation of funds within nonprofits, especially those that claim to serve vulnerable populations. So they're whining about food insecurity. They're getting money from the federal government and from the state government, tax money, your money. Wow, I'm way behind. I'm sorry, guys. They're getting millions in taxpayer funding, paying most of it out in the form of salary to themselves. As you saw, this woman is getting damn near $750,000 a year, and then they're whining that they're not making enough money, or they're not getting enough money for resources for their so-called nonprofit. A lot of the food banks that I've dealt with in the past, almost everyone there is a volunteer, pretty much. Many food banks operate entirely. A food bank that I knew, and her name was Lois, and she was affiliated with the Brighton Congregational Church in Brighton, Massachusetts. And she ran a food pantry out of that church that she opened up 3 days a week. And it was completely volunteer. It was completely volunteer. She didn't get a dime. How do you put yourself in the position where you're making that kind of money operating a food pantry? And not just her, but like half a dozen of them. I mean, they weren't making as much as she was. She wasn't making nearly as much as she was. But still, I mean, you can't tell me that getting from, what was it, 312, I think was the smallest one, 312,000 to 721,000 a year. That makes no sense. That makes no sense. I couldn't imagine her, making more than, at the absolute peak most, depending upon what she's doing or what her workload looks like. I couldn't imagine her making more than, say, an average middle-class salary. If that. And I'm being generous. I don't get it. I don't get it. And again, I can't keep up with all the comments, so I'm just cascading a few of them there. And it's amazing, again, how many, when I pull up a corruption story, how often, it's almost always a politician, but how often there's a charity in one of these stories. Oh, Daniel has joined us. You didn't see him. Daniel jumped into the chair behind me. You can't see it because I've got the comments up on there. There's Daniel laying in the chair, for those of you who can see. Keeping me company. One of our felines, one of the rescues. Daniel was a rescue. They all are, honestly. All of our felines are rescue. Again, we're currently taking care of 15. The most we've had at once is 20. The most we've taken care of at once is 20 felines. And they're all clean and healthy and well-fed and well cared for. We do the best we can. JJ says that pisses me off. Someone who runs a nonprofit should never make that amount of money. I agree. I agree. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, is she running a national operation? And she's like a district manager overseeing like 50 food banks? No, it's one. It's a single food bank getting millions of tax dollars. That's your money. That's your money. It's crazy. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. We'll go ahead and pull up the debt clock as we get close to the end here. Yeah, Peter says, if you think food banks are bad, check out the Clinton Foundation. Oh, don't get me started on the Clinton Foundation. Oh, my God. Yeah, I know they're raking it in by the billions. Haiti is still wondering what happened to that $5 billion. They never got it. They never got it. Nash says you can never have too many cats. I know. Hey, listen, I'll tell you, I feel like I feel really bad even just doing the adoptions, which I do through a service. You know, the people are vetted. I don't just give away cats. You know, I go to like Paws or someone to help with and to help to facilitate that. But I hate even adopting them. And Lucky says he feels cheated. He should have got on Coffee Talk. Well, here's your debt clock to round things out. Doge projected savings currently sitting at $381 billion. It looks like it'll hit 382 by this evening. So there you go. I'll go ahead and start signing off. Again, you are listening to and/or watching Coffee Talk. You can find the live portion Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube, on Coffee Talk and Prepper University. You can find me on X at Coffee Talk Chat. You can find me on fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta. Special thanks to John for making a donation to the channel today, as well as Rodney. Again, that goes to our feline fund. Help us with our shelter pets. Well, not really pets either. I hesitate to use the term pet. They're my friends and neighbors. And so thank you everyone else who joined us here today. As always, hope you got something out of the conversation, and we will catch you again tomorrow.